What does it feel like to be cast out by your own blood, only to rise from the ashes they left you in? Elias Kane knew that sting all too well. Born into a family of high achievers, doctors, lawyers, and corporate titans, she was the odd one out. The dreamer who'd rather sketch inventions in the margins of his notebooks than follow the path they'd carved. His siblings called him the family fool, their laughter sharp as knives at every holiday gathering. By the time he was 25, they'd had enough of his childish ideas and cut him off. No inheritance, no support, just a cold farewell and a door slammed shut. But Elias wasn't one to break. He carried their scorn like a badge, determined to prove them wrong, even if it took years of grit and heartbreak. In the early days, survival was a battle. Elias lived in a cramped studio apartment, the kind where the walls seemed to close in at night. He worked odd jobs: dishwasher, delivery driver, anything to keep the lights on while pouring every spare moment into his passion, designing tech that could change lives. His first invention, a small device to help the visually impaired navigate crowded spaces, was born from watching a blind woman struggle at a busy intersection. He called it the Sight Guide, a wearable sensor that whispered directions through vibrations. It was a spark of hope, but the world wasn't ready to listen. Investors laughed him out of meetings, echoing his family's disdain. A fool's dream, they said. Still, Elias kept tinkering, his hands stained with solder and his heart fueled by defiance. Lila became his unexpected ally. She didn't just believe in the Sight Guide, she believed in him. Together, they refined the design, pooling their skills to make it sleeker, smarter, more human. Lila's knack for storytelling turned his clumsy pitches into compelling narratives. They worked late into the nights, fueled by cheap coffee and shared dreams. When they finally got a small grant from a local startup fund, it felt like the universe was finally listening. The Sight Guide hit the market, and word spread first slowly, then like wildfire. By the end of the third year, it was in the hands of thousands, praised for its simplicity and impact. Elias wasn't just a dreamer anymore. He was a name in tech, a quiet revolutionary. The money came fast. Elias Kane, the family fool, was now a multi-millionaire, his face on magazine covers, his story a beacon for underdogs. He bought a house in the hills, not for the luxury, but for the view, a reminder of how far he'd climbed. Lila stayed by his side, not as a partner in romance, but as a friend and co-founder, her laughter a constant anchor. Yet, even as the world celebrated him, Elias couldn't shake the ache of his family's rejection. He hadn't spoken to them in a decade, but their voices still echoed in his quieter moments, mocking his every step. Then came a knock. It was a rainy evening, the kind that made the city feel small and lonely. Elias opened his door to find his older brother, Nathan, standing there, soaked and hollow-eyed. The man who'd once called him a waste of space now looked like a shadow of himself. Behind him stood their sister, Clara, her usual sharpness dulled by desperation. Their father's business, the family's pride, had collapsed under bad investments. They were broke, their legacy in ruins. "We need your help, Elias," Nathan said, his voice cracking. "You're the only one who can fix this." Elias felt the weight of their words, heavy with irony. He invited them in, not out of warmth but curiosity. They sat in his living room, surrounded by the trappings of his success, and poured out their story. The family that had shunned him now needed his wealth, his name, his connections. Clara spoke of saving their father's legacy, her eyes avoiding his. Nathan promised they'd make it right, as if words could erase a decade of silence. Elias listened, his face unreadable, his heart a storm of old wounds and new power. He could have said no. He could have laughed, thrown their words back in their faces, let them drown in their own pride. But as he looked at them, he saw something he hadn't expected: fear. not just of losing money, but of losing everything they'd built their identities around. It was a fear he knew intimately, one he'd faced alone all those years ago. And in that moment, Elias realized something profound didn't want revenge. He wanted something better, to be the man he'd always hoped to be, not the fool they'd labeled him. He agreed to help, but on his terms. He'd fund their recovery, but they'd work for it not as heirs, but as partners in a new venture under his company. They'd learn what he'd learned. That value isn't inherited, it's earned. Nathan and Clara hesitated, their pride warring with their desperation, but they agreed. Over the next months, Elias watched them struggle to adapt, their old arrogance crumbling under the weight of humility. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, moments when old wounds reopened. But there were also breakthroughs, small, hard-won moments of respect. Lila, ever the optimist, saw it before Elias did. "You're not just saving them," she told him one night. "You're rewriting your story with them." And she was right. Elias wasn't just giving them money. He was giving them a chance to see him, truly see him, for the first time. He didn't need their approval anymore, but he found peace in offering them a path to redemption. Years later, the Kane family wasn't what it used to be. The business was reborn, smaller but stronger, built on collaboration rather than ego. Elias stood at the helm, not as the fool, but as the anchor. His siblings never fully apologized, but their actions spoke louder gratitude in their work, respect in their silence. And Elias? He carried on, his heart lighter, his dreams bigger. He'd turned their rejection into his strength, their doubt into his triumph. But more than that, he'd learned that true wealth wasn't in the money or the fame, it was in the courage to rise, to forgive, and to build something new from the ruins of the past.